And what's up, guys? Jason Steiner here at VA Boss, and it is a lovely Thursday afternoon. Hopefully, some people will join in here soon to listen to some VA assumptions. But before we get into that, I mean, obviously, people know that, or hopefully, unless you live under a rock, that the Fed came out yesterday and said some things, of course, and things have a tendency to go a little haywire when Mr. Powell speaks, and they did. This is why this conversation we're about to have is important, because my thoughts and beliefs is that by summertime, by heavy PCS season when it rolls around, rates are going to be above 4%. That's my take. Just from what I'm seeing, trends and things that I read. I'm not an expert. I don't believe to be, but this is why this assumption process and understanding it, at least the basics of this, because obviously we as originators, we don't deal with the assumption process. That's dealt with at the servicer's level. And so, but it's important to be able to have some of these conversations with your veteran active military clients, sellers especially, who may want to let somebody assume their loan, especially because rates last year, the last couple of years have been so damn low that it's hard to turn down 2.25%, money, 2.5%, things like that. It's very attractive, obviously. But there's some things that you need to know. There's some things that you need to let your sellers know because, about the process and some of the details of the process, and we'll get into that. So I want to talk about 4 key points with this assumption process. And I had to dig in a little bit myself because obviously we don't deal with it. So I had to go to the handbook and read a few things and research some things and have some conversations with some friends of mine at the VA just to make sure that some of the information I give you is accurate, obviously. But it's out there for your consumption too. You can go to the VA handbook and read it if you would like. And, educate yourself as it comes to this and some of the more gorier details, as we would call them. But anyway, so 4 key points. So number 1, and a very important one, that is where I would start if I were having a conversation with a buyer or seller about this, is that the VA obviously allows the assumptions, right there in the handbook. But the servicers who service these loans are not required to. Okay? But it's in Chapter 5, I believe, TJ is what it is. Chapter 7. Chapter 7 of the handbook, Processing Loan Assumptions. It is light reading. Let's see, what is it, chapter? Yeah, Chapter 5. Yeah, I was right. Chapter 5, Section 7. That's what it is. Of the VA handbook. And so if you want to go out there and read that, you can. But number 1 is the VA allows the assumptions, but the servicers are not required to. Okay? So if you're going to talk to your clients about assumptions, make sure the servicer that is currently servicing their loans allows for VA assumptions. Look, I don't know why a servicer would not allow it. I don't know what a reason would be. I'm not on the servicing end of it, but but they don't. They don't have to. Okay, so have that question, have that out there. Make sure you're getting that questions from the current servicer. Number 2, the VA buyer whoever's assuming that loan has to credit income asset qualify. Okay, it's not just, hey, I'm going to take over your loan. Hey, okay, great. Let's sign paperwork and we're done. They still have to go through, if the servicer allows it, they've got to provide all of that documentation to the servicer that makes sure that they can get paid back. Okay, so that's a key point. Within that, the person that's going to be assuming the loan, okay, is not required to be a veteran. It can be assumed. I could assume TJ's loan as a civilian. Okay, that's allowed. But here's some key points to that, is that if I assume TJ's loan and I am not a veteran, then TJ's entitlement still remains with that property. Okay, so that can affect him buying going forward. Unlike a traditional sale, where when it's sold, the entitlement is restored and he has his full entitlement or whatever that looks like if he had any other properties. Okay, so that's a huge thing. Make sure you're doing that. Make sure you're asking that question, right? And informing your veteran seller that if it's a civilian who does it, well, their entitlement's going to stay with the property. Okay? And the biggest one, and this is to me the most important one out of all of these, so point number 4 being that even if I assume TJ's loan, okay, you would think that would be the end of it. Like, okay, we swapped, I'm now liable on the mortgage deed, all the paperwork's transferred over. Okay, but it's not where it ends. TJ would have to apply or fill out some paperwork, and it's called a release of liability. That release of liability has to be filed to make sure that anything that happens going forward, let's say that he didn't file for the release of liability, let's say that I default on that loan, that can affect him. That can affect his credit. It's one of the little nuances about the assumption process. So make sure that if you have a client that's going to go through this process, when you get to the end of it, make sure that they fill out the specific form number with the VA, the release of liability, to take the liability off themselves and transfer it to the new owner. Okay? That is wildly important for the end of the process. Okay? I can see how people would forget that step. And then it would go sideways, and this guy would get a short sale or a foreclosure or miss a payment. Those missed payments can affect the veteran who let that person assume their loan. Obviously, we don't want that to happen. Okay? So, and the biggest thing, and this is what I've heard, I obviously have never been through the assumption process, but I've had clients who had sellers, the time frame in which this can happen can vary from servicer to servicer. In a traditional resale transaction, typically those happen in 30 days or less. I have yet to see an assumption happen in fewer 30 days or less. Most of the ones that I've been brought in on or asked questions about were 90 days. We had one time I heard that was about 4 or 5 months with one of the larger servicers in Freedom Mortgage. So that can play a part in this. Typically, if people are going to assume that, move on to the next transaction, they don't want to wait for 3 or 4 months. Okay? So I don't know why they take that long. To me, they shouldn't. That's left up to the individual servicer that is allowing that transaction to go through. But there are specific things that can affect that, and I think that obviously we have a responsibility to talk to our clients about that. So, just be cognizant of those things. It's going to become increasingly popular because of the rate environment that we're about to get into. I know, with PCS season coming up and it's going to be getting more busy, that might be an attractive thing. But to somebody who's active duty military who doesn't have the time to wait for that assumption process to take place, that can play a part too. Okay, because there's deadlines, timelines, and there's the reality of how long that it takes. Okay, so those 4 key points are things that I would talk to my buyers and sellers about if this were going to be my transaction. Okay, I'm sure there's other things in there that obviously are can be pertinent, but those are the top 4 things that I would let people know because that can affect someone's decision. And I think that's what we have a responsibility to do, is to educate them, lead them down that path so they make their own decision. So TJ asks that through the VA direct or through the servicer. So the process goes through the servicer. It does not go through the VA. Okay, the VA does not handle it. They write the guidelines for it, but it's done through the servicers. There was something, I think. So, let's see. There was something in here that I was going to read to you. Let's see. No, I think the only other caveat is that this has to happen with sellers with automatic authority or with servicers with automatic authority. So I would venture a guess that 99% of the servicers in the United States have automatic authority. That means they can close VA loans without having the VA to look at it. That's the only other thing that I think I read through here. But anyhow, I mean, that's the VA assumption process in a nutshell. I hope it helps. I hope it hopefully spark some conversations. Maybe you start working these things into your buyer consults, seller consults when you're listing. The biggest thing and the reality of it is, yes, it sounds great, but maybe just due to the time frame, how long it could take for a seller to process these, maybe it's not so great, right? I think that's going to be, the release of liability is done through the servicer, TJ. So if they have to fill out that form, they're going to get it from the servicer and send it to the servicer so they can release that veteran from liability from the new owner. So it's done directly through the servicer. So it's filed with everything else. So there is a form number, and I'm going to get it to you. I knew I had it in here somewhere. Man, I thought I had it in here, but I don't. I'm going to get you the form number. I'll post it in the video so you guys can see it. There's a form number out there, and I want to make sure you get the right info. Man, I had it saved. Oh, one other thing. They were talking about divorces. If it were a divorce situation. And those can happen in divorce situations, but it's right there in Section 7, subsection M. It says release of liability procedures for divorce. It's a whole different topic, but that's also a good one to understand. So one other thing too, the funding fee. There's a 0.5% funding fee on VA assumptions. Now, obviously, if you have a disability rating, that goes away. But if you do not have a disability rating, it is a 0.5% funding fee. So you do not have the 2.3 or the 3.6 or whatever it is if it's veteran to veteran. It's 0.5%. Okay, so that's a good thing. But outside of that, refer to the handbook if you need to ask questions. I'll be happy to have those conversations with you. We'll get a little more in depth. I just wanted to bring this to your attention. So we could start that dialogue, and if anybody has any questions on any of this, I will be happy to answer those. Hope everybody stays well out there, and we'll see you guys soon.